somewhat better than some of the affordable housing that they have out there at the communities that, with all the people there.
You gotta leave, okay?
So can you tell me how many times you've been through this?
25.
25.
Easy.
Wow.
In 1 year.
One that I believe is missing, or
Specific to you. Just specific to you.
the respect.
Yeah.
Even from the staff members, most of the staff members I know, well, that I knew that had actual respect, naturally cared about what their jobs entailed, got fired.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Utah Stories. So today on the program, we're getting back to covering what we've covered for years now in depth, which is the homeless situation in Salt Lake City and in Utah. And today on the program, we have Robin Pendergrast. Thanks for joining me, Robin.
Oh, my pleasure, Richard. I appreciate everything you've done, all the coverage for the homeless situation, both obviously here in Salt Lake City and the county, but all over the state. It's very important.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you're doing it as well. And your book is out and
Selling
that's great.
all over the parts of the world too, but mostly the United States.
It feels like they do some good, decent measures, but then they back out of things that are working, that are good. I felt like the pods were in a good spot, but then of course they decided, well, we're not going to keep them there, which was the most centrally located position they could be in.
Right.
Let's start with that. So explain what the pods are.
Well,
and that experiment they tried last winter.
You know, the experiment worked in many ways, Richard.
Yeah.
Was it successful? Well, I'm sure it saved lives.
They've decided they dismantled the pods. They're moving them underneath.
They did already.
Yeah, they're moving them underneath that 6 South Viaduct.
Yeah,
and that was another famous homeless camp.
Well, that was the home of Camp Pioneer, which in February of 1922, February 17th to be exact, and I don't know if you were there,
I was there before the big dismantling that you photographed. I was there just a few days before that, and I did a few interviews before that. That was the most successful camp I've ever seen in terms of cleanliness, people being happy there, being operated and managed by the homeless for the homeless. But for some reason, political leaders can't wrap it around their heads that the homeless community could ever manage their own camp.
Well, I know that there has been folks like Nomad Kasanya and others that have worked diligently to try to get permanent encampments like they've had in Denver and Reno, places like that where I've been. But the interesting thing was the Camp Pioneer encampment was successful. And Mendenhall actually went out there one time a year before, just on a weekend, I think with Wendy and Carl and people like that, you know. And I made the offer just to keep the sanity of the location and the opportunity for folks to have a decent camp. But a dumpster out there would have made a huge difference just in the environment they were there. And yes, they did police their own environment. They cleaned it up constantly and left bags and bags that the city said they would pick up prior to the abatement. Yeah. And all of these quasi-promises were made.
The excuse for dismantling it, even despite it being successfully keeping people warm and keeping them in a community, was that they opened up the Ramada Inn. And I think the Ramada was able to take maybe 150 people at that time.
Yeah.
But then that closed too. And so, of course, they're just shuffling people around. But I'm wondering...
Shuffling is the key word, by the way.
Yeah. I'm wondering, do you think this new solution is a good idea to put the pods in that 6 South Viaduct area?
Well, I think it's part of the solution. It's not the entire solution. If they put 50 more in, that'll be 75. But it's essentially the same setup as they had over behind the Rio. Except they're 75, and they're when I was over there, they were doing all the grounding of all the electrical, but they're working hard on the same track that was abated almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Or less than that, and the abatement itself took on national recognition with one image that I'm sure with the people's standing in front of this huge bulldozer.
That was in the New York Times, right?
Yeah. It was they referred to it as the Tiananmen Square.
Yeah.
Revisited.
Yeah.
But that day people showed up, advocates for the homeless. They parked their cars to try to block what was happening.
Big, giant front end loaders.
Oh, it's huge.
Coming in, a big procession ready to take out this giant camp that everybody who was there living there loved.
Exactly.
And like Tiananmen Square, it was like they were trying to block the police and the enforcers' ability to dismantle a camp of people who just want to have a place to live and go.
Correct.
And this was before the United Methodist Church had their doors open. Correct?
Absolutely.
So there was really literally no other place to go.
No place to go.
And that's really what sparked my interest in this whole story. What's unfolding here in Salt Lake is we're the headquarters of one of the biggest humanitarian organizations worldwide, the LDS Church.
Correct.
That Welfare Square ships out food, clothing, blankets all over the world, every corner of the world during a humanitarian disaster. Here we have a humanitarian disaster happening, unfolding 5 blocks away from those world headquarters.
Yeah.
And who's talking about it? Not so much the local media, but the national press,
Correct.
the New York Times. And
Correct.
that's how I think I got to know you, Robin, from working with Getty.
Well, it included that, of course. The national publicity that was generated in part by some of the images that made their way, to the national media and syndicates. But after the abatement took place, and Second, and Wendy showed up with the church people, there was finally a place for 85. But in the process of that abatement, there was confrontations, there were some arrests, but it was an attempt, even without toilet facilities, for the folks to maintain some equilibrium in their life. Mm-hmm. And it was totally destroyed. People were moved on. And of course, every time somebody moved in there over the ensuing 2 years, they were abated immediately. Mm-hmm. The only thing they didn't do that they've done in other locations is fence out the homeless.
Yeah.
Putting these fences in. They show up overnight.
Like we were covering about a year ago, the islands.
Yeah, the island, and they're gone now. But the one interesting thing that you might see in some of the photos of some of the homeless situations was during the summer, they had the arts festival or something, and the fences showed up near the library where literally 40, 50 homeless had moved in to prevent them from staying there anymore while allegedly they grew the grass and things like that. Well, so be it. They had the event, and eventually now the fences have come down. I was over there today at the library for the homeless court that took place. Mm-hmm. And the density, sheer number of homeless people was incredible.
Really?
It was incredible.
Is this what you have photos of?
Yeah.
Today? This is from today?
And you'll see.
You got to switch to camera 3, Golda.
Absolutely. And you can see.
So this is Library Square today.
Exactly. And I didn't quite understand what they were doing. This is the public service building, fire and police.
Yeah, right out in front of the police office.
This is just a small portion. People have moved back in to
click through that a little bit.
Occupy. And there's some of my friends you can see.
That's in front of the library?
Yeah, it's right down the library walkway. Now, all the images that I have from the court that took place, they're very revealing and in terms of the sheer number of people. All the homeless showing up with their dogs for Rough Haven. giving them shots and, taking a look at their health.
Where's this photo from?
It's along Rio. It's along.
Is that now?
Yeah, no. That was taken about a year ago.
Okay.
But this was actually the other night. Channel 13, Fox 13, had a story on the
that's what you're showing here.
the new plans that allegedly have evolved somehow. Funding, all this. It's almost like generic plans, cosmetic plans, with money and the pod. I call it Mendenhall Farms. It provides a very definitive purpose, but it doesn't accommodate the problem. What Fox was talking about was the funding that.
So we have this graphic of the budget and cost,
and
the
you look at the recommended funding.
So
it's
we're
far,
short about
far
$2
apart.
$2 million short of what they're recommending.
Exactly.
Do you know what they're skimping out on?
Well, no, I don't. I've only seen the number. Emily from Channel 13 was. Hopefully, she's going to send me the budget that was defined. But again, this is one of the things that I've been a proponent of for 6-7 years, Richard, is all of these different, I call them silos of organizations, of people, including the LDS Church. Everybody's moving around. Maybe they're moving around. They're not doing anything with any real hardcore substance.
Yeah.
They're all functioning with their own agendas, their own egos, their own this. And it's problematic, not just here, but all over the country.
Yeah.
There's
it's like you with Fort Pioneer, what you could clearly see on display was when you would talk to these people, a lot of them were actually working, going to jobs,
absolutely
saving up money.
Absolutely.
This camp was working, absolutely functional and working. The leadership did not care that it was working.
Correct.
This was not sanctioned, therefore it's got to go. And so that what it really clued me in on was leadership and the actual problem are so far apart. They're miles
Absolutely.
and miles apart. The leadership doesn't talk to the people who are on the ground, who are suffering from homelessness. I don't think they even, watch our interviews or anything like that.
Well, they should, Richard, because you speak the truth. You speak the pragmatic truth of number one, what's really going on. Number two, the response. And number three, the opportunities that exist if some of these politicians would spend less time fooling around with House bills that, in my estimation, have no practical substance to them. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a politician, believe me, in the position I'm in. But I look and read and hope that these might materialize into something. Yeah. The result is nothing. Now, it was Cox that when he got elected, he created this 27-person homeless committee panel. It did nothing. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, there's a new committee of 9. So far, once a month. 11? Or it could be 11,
Yeah, he reduced it to 11. We can't have 28. Let's have 11.
Exactly.
But, the thing that I look at is how many of these 11 were formerly homeless. How many of them know homeless people by name?
Correct.
How many of them know the community, really? And that's they don't think that component is necessary. I think these people should all know 5 homeless people who they can talk to.
And
that should be our job requirement.
Well, and yeah, absolutely. I've had the benefit of meeting many, many homeless that I still have relationships with today, one of which told me something very revealing that I'll share with you that nobody's heard yet. But these homeless people, they're nothing but people tied up with mental issues or drug or alcohol. That's not the truth. That's not the case. Yes, like any society, they have their issues, maybe more. There's drug traffic, things like that. And they've had quite a few problems on the Jordan Trail, but there's some highly intellectual people. Some people choose to live in tents for affordability. Some people, like I've met up at the mountain behind the Capitol, that have lived there for 7 or 8 years, prefer and have made a valuable living for themselves by maintaining the integrity they have of their homes, literally up on the mountain, what there's been attempts to abate and get rid of.
Yeah.
But that's a pathetic response that took place recently.
Yeah,
And
they're always abating that area.
well, they've built big walls now to try to prevent people to be able to drive up with trailers and things. What
I
they
haven't
did,
seen that in a while.
I've got images of them, but
But the homeless camps, they're really sophisticated. I mean,
of course.
Those people have much more permanent type structures.
Well,
and-
exactly. The one couple that I met during the last abatement with the helicopters and everything, they lived there 7 years, right there. Another gentleman
I've
has
heard
lived
of
there
them.
5.
I've never met them.
They're wonderful people. Now, is it fair to assess all homeless people as being wasted human beings, or they don't belong, or they, out of sight, out of mind? Well, I could tell you, even again, some of the folks that I talked to today at the court, very, very intellectual, smart people, and there's issues of affordability, of course, that we don't know all about, but the practical living arrangements that they've chosen to maintain, and many have jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Many have jobs.
Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't know that much about this till I thought this was 2016. I want to do a little documentary about the homeless situation because the Daily Show was visiting Utah as this model template in 2015 that we did. We would solve homelessness. The Washington Post did an article that we solved homelessness. Then 2016, a year later, we have Operation Rio Grande. So I did a little documentary, and the most interesting comment I found among the homeless was young people homeless on the streets saying, "I'm homeless by choice.
Yep.
I could get a job. I could work Walmart, Amazon. I could get some corporate job, but this is my civil disobedience. This is my way of protesting corporate America and the situation of jobs." And I'm like, that's crazy. Everybody thinks you're out here because you're a bum and you just want to do drugs
Correct.
all day, and that's actually not the case.
Well, Richard, I've said, and it was the New York Times article that got me initially plugged into this whole homeless thing 7 years ago. I've said somehow leadership, somebody, it could be Jenny Wilson, it could be Aaron, it could be Cox, it could be King, I don't know. But they've got to not figure out a way. It's a very easily done complement to solving the problem, is get rid of all these silos, all these individuals, all these organizations. The politicians don't get it. Bring them together, put them in a room and lock them there until they can collaborate together on what's going to be done point by point by point. Now, there's a little bit of that with the pod farm, but there's so many others that are on the street. I saw so many new faces today. I remember faces. There's so many situations happening, whether it's along the trail, south or north.
Do you feel like most of them are coming from other states?
Yeah. I talked to them and I
It
asked
seems
them.
like a lot have come from California.
Yeah,
where it's
California,
too crowded.
Idaho,
Really?
Colorado, and that was, one of Cox's confrontations that he had, a month or two ago about the mayor sending over homeless here. But
we knew we were getting the folks from Jackson Hole.
yeah, the Jackson
Giving
Hole one-way
them
bus.
buses, yeah,
I
bus
talked to
tickets.
somebody last week from Jackson Hole who was very much aware of that happening in their town.
Yeah. So I mean, this is how I look at it. On the one hand, you have a population of people. I mean, they're so totally diverse. You can't make any stereotypes about the homeless, too. That's another thing.
Of course.
They're not all on drugs. They're not all mentally ill. A lot of them are sort of there by choice. But at the same time, and I get that, but you can't have people living on the streets in parks. You can't have them taking our public spaces and making them so they're unsafe and that people don't want to go there, especially like the Jordan River area.
Correct.
Around 1700 South to downtown. They've got to come up with a plan and a reasonable idea not just in the long term, in the shorter term of what they can do, where they can go. I mean, I talked to the guy who's now running Solutions Utah, who used to run the Salt Lake County cleanup department after the abatements.
Yeah.
And he just said, we pulled tons and tons and tons of garbage repeatedly. Like the first one, I think he said like 300 tons of garbage out of the Jordan River area. And they go back every year and pull out more. Obviously, that's the main place to camp. They can't really be there. What could happen in the shorter term, do you think, that could alleviate this problem?
Well, I think, first of all, there's a couple of very specific things. Number one, I said the collaboration. Get these people together, the politicians, the individual organizations that you're very much aware of, even individuals. There was a group today down at the homeless court, something about they've known each other for 50 years, but they showed up with tons and tons of fresh food, fresh vegetables. And of course, the court itself is a fabulous adventure to observe. But it's a matter, and I've said this time and time again, I use the metaphor silos. There's so many of these exist, politicians, political groups, Democrats, Republicans, and committees, agendas. Let's have an agenda. Okay, let's talk. Then we'll see you in a month. They're not doing anything. They're not on the streets talking to the people. And having available spaces like what's been taken over for the new pod town, or whatever you want to call it, it's a really good start. But the other folks that are also spending their time, not their wheels, but their time, providing support on the streets. I mean, there's people like me, I don't mean to be self-adulating here, but are loaded up with water constantly.
Yeah.
The police in Tucson, Arizona, they carry water with them to give to the homeless people.
It's amazing how that is the number one thing they need.
To stay hydrated.
They get a lot of food from a lot of different volunteer organizations, which
Correct.
is awesome, and a lot of clothing. But when it comes to just number one thing, they say it's batteries, water, sterno that they can burn.
Absolutely. Well, you know, it's interesting. You mentioned the Jordan Trail. This last, I think it's the last couple of weeks, the state fair has been on. And I was just told today, factually documented, that there were 5 cops suspended for beating some homeless people behind the fair grounds where they locked it up with fences. One of which was a highway patrolman. The other 4 were Salt Lake City cops. And one of them, I'm going to clarify it, was fired. The way they were essentially physically beating up these folks. Up and along the river, in places where they could find shelter from, the rain that's coming next week. It's atrocious that culture exists.
Well, I'm glad they got busted. How did they even get busted?
Well, the person who I talked to today, she was fabulous in providing the documentation and talking. Man, one cop didn't have his video on, and she could see that. I mean, she's so plugged in to how they behave. But it's not all cops. Good apple, bad apple.
Yeah.
But a situation, that's the culture that starts at the top, that's controlled at the top. That situation is horrible. I'm sure it's being replicated in other places. But even tomorrow, as I mentioned, Saturday, the video the docudrama that was done entitled Nowhere to Go is being debuted at the Capstone Arts Festival. Now, I've already had commitments from national organizations such as ProPublica and some others that want to see that, and more than likely will make it available through their columns or articles to share.
Tell me more about this. So this is a docudrama about your...
It's about abatement.
What you've been doing? Oh, just about abatements.
And it was produced and directed by Julie Cordell Simmons, I believe. I worked with her in providing images that are in it. But it was an actual video that was done, providing with actors and professional broadcast video, done over the course of a couple of weeks, edited. And I've seen it once. It's fabulous. It's not exactly a good omen for a recommendation for the Salt Lake City, but it happens everywhere.
So is it actors acting out an abatement?
Yeah.
Wow.
There were some, ironically, some homeless people on site that were observing and, of course, having a meal and talking to some of the actors, but they did a fabulous job with the documentation that took place at some of the areas where there were abatements underneath 400 South as it's making its move onto the expressway going south. A huge abatement was there, and I guess I was there more so I did the stills for them for their own documentation, but to be there and to watch what I've seen hundreds of times and places, including Los Angeles, including Seattle. I've been to those cities and seen the same type of movement of the homeless away from their communities.
Yeah,
it's very sad.
It's amazing. The one you invited me to that was the biggest abatement I'd been to. That was where we had Stacy Johnson. I don't know what's happened to her. I interviewed her while it was happening, and she's just like, I'm not going to leave my husband or my pets. This is my only option to sleep on the streets. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. There's no shelter where you can keep your pet and keep your spouse with you, beside you.
And
there's no accommodation for that.
Well, and today I reflect on the homeless court again. Ruff Haven was there and volunteering. A lot of the folks in the homeless community for companionship have dogs.
Yeah, and
some have cats.
Too. Like if you're sleeping outside in a tent, I mean, your dog is your greatest protector.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine I would live any other way than out on the streets like these people do, because we would be shelter resistant as well. Absolutely.
Of course.
And so that's where I have a lot of compassion, and where I have just zero understanding for the state officials and city officials is we've had this problem every year for the past 5 years, and only now, this year, do we have anything resembling a real sanctioned campground.
Correct.
And until this point, all you did was harass, confiscate, make these people's lives even worse than they already were.
Ruining lives.
And just the objective was just to destroy and disrupt. And I just don't get that. I don't get
well,
that.
And then you take a look during this 5-year period, the arrival of volunteer groups like Second and Second, Wendy Garvin, the Nomad Alliance contingent with their supply drops every month, other organizations, churches, individuals showing up, and even somebody like Nomad. They acquired and recreated the infamous blue bus. But I just read and I saw it on the Fox 13 report. And Davis County is another bus concept where it's almost like, you're sleeping in little tiny pods off the street. Logistically, I don't know how that's going to work.
You'll climb up to a pod?
Exactly. And what you see is a bus. It's got warmth, but let's talk about the logistics of people coming in on a cold night. They've got a push cart, a wagon, something full of their belongings, and they're going to be asked to essentially drop everything, put it in a corner, do something, and then take their place in location number 6. The Dignity Bus solution may be idealistic, but so was, all the challenges that Nomad had with the blue bus, literally and initially getting it, appropriate and safe for the homeless folks, but then having it on the streets, finding places to put it.
Does Nomad still have that bus?
Yeah.
I went in there and interviewed a bunch of the guys in there one day, and man, I got to say, afterward, I had this, I mean, it smelled really weird, like burning plastic. And then afterward, I had this really weird feeling, like it must have been from residual meth fumes or something. But man,
they could have been. But I can tell you, Richard, I mean, I was, well, again, a lot of photographs while it was moving around, getting, at the supply drops. And there was one time, it was a year ago, that I actually came on a Saturday morning. It was parked over on the west side, and they had just pulled a homeless person out from behind a dumpster who was pretty close to dying. Cold, snow, that type of thing. And when I showed up for another reason, I saw him, and I could tell with my medical background, and his pulse was erratic, and he was ill. He needed to be at the hospital, at least being warmed. I called the fire department and the police to get them there to take him off the bus where he was being warmed, but not like they can do in an emergency room. And they saved his life. Wow. Now, what would have happened if he stayed there? I don't know. But the reality is he was taken from the back of a dumpster, covered with snow, brought in, covered up, given some warm liquids that sustained him at least until the fire department and police could get there.
Yeah, that's great. I think that I've had on, the families of two victims of people who've frozen to death. And one was Candace, the story of this woman who was taken in by a sex trafficker, and he was essentially trafficking her for drugs. And I'm trying to think of her last name because there's a lot of women named Candace, but she was trading tricks for drugs basically in a tent. And then she was getting so many drugs and getting slowly overdosing, and people were noticing she's not coming out of the tent, people in the homeless community, but nothing was really happening. And then the guy who was trafficking her carves his name in her arm, and then she ODs and dies. No investigation. Police don't think it's necessary. I mean, they did have a tiny little investigation, but they didn't want to bring any charges against the guy trafficking her, even though they know exactly who it was. And it makes me realize there's essentially at least two tiers of justice in this world. There's justice for the wealthy who can afford attorneys and have fight back against when law malfeasance happens. But then if you are homeless and you don't have a shelter, there's really no justice for these people.
No.
There's no real human rights.
And Richard, that's one of the silos, is the police and judicial culture that is maintained at different levels. Mm-hmm. We see that all the time, but even a homeless court that's set up by the city and other support groups is, it's a fabulous intervention, but for 3 hours. I've got story after story that I've observed of like at Camp Pioneer, where they had a couple of social workers walking around but doing nothing. I got photos of that, and the picture.
I think I'm in a church, and I recommended we have a homeless outreach committee. I think a lot of people don't know what they can do to really help, because the homeless are getting fed pretty well who are in and around downtown Salt Lake. I saw several times where they've gotten 2 different lunches to choose from. But people, I think they don't really know what they can do to really help. What is it that you think more of the public could get involved in doing that?
The public with a I'm going to use that word again, if you don't mind, getting rid of the silos, the collaboration, not having committees that are really functioning superficially. And, I've asked Galen Benyon,
Miller?
to provide an audit of all the money. But what can they do? They can step up. They can do simple things like, as I've done and others that I've encouraged, carrying water. But just throwing blankets out and setting up a food table is a fairly temporary thing. Mm-hmm. I think the concept of encampments that can be controlled and permanent is it's a real opportunity now, but to do something immediate here on September, whatever it is, 13th, 14th, to do something immediate is going to save a lot of lives. That's where these volunteer groups come in. That's where the LDS Church could come in.
Yeah.
I did have a pipeline through somebody at the Deseret, where they have clothes and everything, the whatever that's called.
Deseret Industries.
Yeah, and it was a manager down there that somebody actually had me come in and talk to them, and it went nowhere. I got plummeted up to a couple of people that are involved with donations, but it just isn't donations. It's a master, I hate to say plan of collaborating all of these people. Meanwhile, there's Second and Second, there's St. Mark's Church, there's Nomad Alliance out there individually saving lives.
Well, it seems to me, and I've said this over and over again, the organizations that are actually doing the least amount of good are getting the most money. I mean,
exactly.
You look at the road home and the facilities they operate, they get the lion's share of the homeless pie.
Correct.
For homeless housing. They are doing an abysmal job. And when the governor spoke a few months ago at a Solutions Utah conference, he said, we need to hold these institutions accountable.
Yep.
They need to be showing results, or they should not be funded. And I would really like to know what the governor is doing in holding those purse strings. Are you going to take away the funding? Because every single person I talk to who, for example, has stayed at the Magnolia Apartments says there's drugs rampant, used all throughout the facility. The people who don't want to use drugs don't want to be there, even though they have like quartz countertops, a balcony. They're beautiful units in the middle of downtown Salt Lake, because it's just rampant drug use. And that's just the fact of every single person I've talked to at Magnolia. Why don't they stop the people from using drugs so it can be a safe environment? Because and I've asked administrators there that, because they just don't care.
And they don't care, and they all, I'm going to twist the metaphor a little bit, but they all have their own agendas, which includes money coming to them to take care of the Magnolia or take care, but it's paying salaries, it's paying
and
people money.
And there's nothing, they got no skin in the game. And there's nothing, if this Magnolia, everyone in there is using drugs, you're going to get the same pay regardless if you cut the drug use.
Correct.
So if they had some kind of incentive program, like, here's your salary, but if we come in there on any given day on a drug test and say 4 out of 5 people, 5 out of 5 people fail that drug test, then we're taking away some of your salary because you are not maintaining a safe
and that was part of what we talked about a little while ago, was the incompetency at the mini pod farm that was installed.
And that was run by SwitchPoint. When I visited it, I thought they were doing a pretty good job. I thought the environment looked pretty good. It was clean. I interviewed some of the people in the pods. They seemed good. That was probably, I would say, in like December of last year.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, this is going to be, Lynn, let's go back to Cox again. An election year coming up in a few days, a few weeks, whatever it is. I didn't stay for all of the debate. I don't even know if that subject came up, but it has to be placed as an agenda item way at the top. They have to have a committee of people that know what they're doing, hands-on, know what the money's doing, what it's not doing, get out onto the streets, interact with what's going on. You've got successful ventures like these volunteer groups that I mentioned. Make sure they get some money to continue, but everybody has to be accountable.
Yeah.
That's why I said to Galen on 2 or 3 occasions, let's get an audit of all of this money, a real audit.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you see the one that came out in 2021 by Jim Buchanan through Solutions Utah? That was the most extensive audit I ever saw.
I didn't.
It was actually quite extensive, and it just showed there's no accountability. There's
none.
They get the money in. They say that this is our head count. Our facility is full. We need more money. That's it. I mean, it just, there's zero accountability when it comes to, are you getting these people integrated into society? Are you getting them jobs programs? Are you getting them off drugs? There's nothing as far as that goes.
No.
And so that's that's
Well,
why I'm such an advocate for like the Other Side Academy.
Well, the Other Side Academy has done, some amazing work, hands-on, accountable, and now with the village hopefully evolving. It's not going to happen this year. They've got some geographic challenges, but it's in motion. 3 years. It's unfortunate, whatever they've run up against, but other people are already hands-on. There are properties available that could become sanctioned campgrounds.
Yeah. They say they want to copy that model all over the
Well,
front.
exactly.
Like,
and
why is it taking so long to get
well, I
this?
tried to get it for you, and I'll find it. San Jose, California, just announced some major hands-on programs. I'm going to go down there and visit with them in a couple of weeks. I want to see what they are really going to do. It's not the winter that we have here, but it can get pretty disruptive to individuals. San Jose, California, Reno's done a good job. There's an individual volunteer group, I believe, in San Antonio that stepped up.
That's the one I keep hearing about.
Yeah, they stepped up as individuals. They stepped up as people that care, and they just didn't show up with a bag of food. They took the situation. Now, I can't give you an upgrade on it to the next level until I really see what's been done. I haven't been there in a while, but I want to see an audit. I want,
it needs to be done again for sure.
When I told Galen, I said, we talked about it a couple of years ago, and she was the one that actually suggested maybe it's time for an audit. I haven't seen it. I've talked to other senators and representatives. You have Steve Eliason out there who's doing wonderful work in the mental health community, which encompasses partly the homeless folks. It's the action there, but after I witnessed that runabout last fall when they had 4 House bills wandering through, last January.
Was it 268, the big one?
I guess. And
do you like what's in that?
Well, it's okay. It's okay as long as there's accountability that we've talked about.
Yeah.
As long as it's implemented.
That was in the language.
Of course.
But the question is that language?
Hello, Governor Cox. What do you think of these? Well, let's sign off on them, and you never hear about them again.
Yeah.
You never see them again.
Yeah.
That to me is just a continuing joke.
Yeah.
And the problem is, we are humans. They're humans.
Yeah. Well, we will take a little pause, and I want to promote this Nowhere to Go. You visit Robin F. Pendergrast. Is that your website?
Yeah, I will have it. They.
How do people see this document?
They will have it available on what's it called?
Download.
Yeah. But I'll have it. Anybody that would want to contact me, I will send them the link. I'm going to send the people that produced it are going to send it out to organizations. I'm sure it'll get to the government. I'm sure it'll get to all the representatives and senators. Now, what kind of impact we'll have, who knows? It's going to open up a pipeline of discussion.
Yeah.
But nowhere to go is what happens. The abatements you've seen, I've seen, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's sad. It's pathetic and sad both. Yeah, well, thank you, Robin, for coming on.
Always a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Yeah.
And I know that Utah Stories and you are constantly engaged with the subject, and it's not going to go away until we get our team together.
I think people just have to realize this can't be somebody else's problem. It's not the government's problem. Get involved, volunteer, be a part of the solution.
Give me 20 minutes with Governor Cox.
Yeah.
Or Aaron. And Jenny Wilson, she's announced that 5-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
There's the plan. Now do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Don't talk about it.
Yep. And so with this program, our sponsor today is the Other Side Academy. We have 2 profiles out on 2 of their amazing success stories. I want to suggest you go out and watch Dylan Gibson and Jordan Holdaway. We have more of these profiles coming out. We're so happy to have them as a sponsor. It's also brought to you by Utah Stories Magazine. You can subscribe to Utah Stories Magazine and support our coverage of these important issues by going out and becoming a member, which we now have a paywall. I'm sorry to say some of our stories and content are behind a paywall. We had to do this because a lot of these stories we do and investigations are quite expensive. And so by becoming a member, you get behind the paywall, and that's just $5 a month. And we've already gotten quite a few people signing up, and we really appreciate your membership and support. And very soon, we have 4 weeks left to get people in Faces of Utah magazine. This is our brand new magazine we are launching. We're sending it to press. It's going to come out in the middle of November. And if you think you have a business success story, we want to tell your story. This magazine is going to be mailed for free to high-end households in Yellcrest and in Park City, homes that are valued between $2 and $3 million. Why are we doing this? Because if we're entering a recession, which it looks like a lot of people are scaling back on their spending, you really need to get your business and your story out to the people who are still going to be spending a lot of money. That's high-end households that are worth between $2 and $3 million. This will be going to free. It'll be available for pickup at high-end hotels and spas and boutiques. And there'll be a way that you can buy this magazine on our website. But we're really excited to tell all these awesome business stories, entrepreneurs who've really done incredible things in Utah. And so get ready to get your hands on this. Or if you want to be a part of it, go to thefaceofutah.com and tell us a little bit about your business, and we will see if you're a good fit to get a profile in here. So with that, thank you so much for watching. This has been Utah Stories production. I'll see you next time.
Fabulous.
Yeah, cool.
Please let me shoot for you.
I'd love it.
I would love to. I mean, I've taken a little, I've taken